Yeah, that's awesome. But the vision and the drive you had, no, I mean, did you watching television? It just came to you
Yeah.
or?
I think it came from watching my grandmother and her always having fashion magazines. Like that was my thing, right? Like I would go to her house, read her fashion magazines, and she always had these big dreams of going to Paris. And I think she's the one who kind of put it in my face to want to dream big and think big, right? And so, and as much as I'm from Michigan, I've always wanted to be an LA girl. So my city that I'm from is called Lansing. And I
Right.
would tell people I'm a kid, like, oh yeah, I'm from LA. And my mom is like, will you stop telling stories? You are from, I'm like, well, they don't know LA is Lansing area. but I just felt like there was so much life. I'm truly the definition of, they say it takes a village to raise a child. And I'm the product of that. Like the community really raised me. My parents had me incredibly young. And I'm thankful for the community in the village that truly raised me and taught me to think big, dream big. And they constantly spoke life into me that, there was nothing too small, right? Like, or nothing too big, rather. I can do literally anything I put my mind to. And so the moment I said something, they're like, okay, well, we believe that God's going to make it happen. So have big faith, work towards getting it done and watch it happen. And that has been the testimony of my life.
Awesome. Now that brings us back to Houston to LA. So one of your big dreams was to move to LA.
Mm-hmm.
So go from there. Go ahead.
Yeah, after I graduated, so initially I wanted to go to after high school, I wanted to go to college at the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising in Los Angeles. That was me finally having my big break, going to LA. But the start of senior year, I was 16, which is pretty early for seniors. And because the school was a private fine art school, so to speak, they didn't want me, or they didn't allow me to go as a minor. And so they're like, well, you have to wait until you're 18 to move out here to live on campus even for the school. And I'm like, well, what the heck can I do? So I ended up going to Douglas J. Aveda for cosmetology. When I was in cosmetology, I felt like God was pulling me elsewhere. And I couldn't exactly put my finger on it, like where that was. And before you know it, I ended up moving to Houston, Texas, to assist my aunt and uncle in planning a church. So I moved to Houston, had never been, and moved there to assist them in ministry. And complete detour from what my plans were. But it's crazy because it was while I was in Houston that my career started to really take off and would send me back to LA, back and forth for work to do what I do now. So I never even actually moved to LA. To this day, I have a home there that I stay at often, but yeah, I never actually became a resident of Los Angeles.
Okay. Now I was reading a story about you went just walked into a place. You studied and researched, found out about a place, and you walked in and got signed on.
Yeah. 2000, I want to say 2015 was the first year that I went to LA for work. And I had a friend who she ended up going to the college that I wanted to go to in LA. And she also was a model. So she was doing very, very well. And she would attend all these different events, all these award shows as a seat filler, meaning, she would just go fill in and sit in for the celebrities until they arrived because she looked pretty and, it was good for the optics. But she called me one day. She's like, oh my goodness. I just got back from the BET Awards. You need to go next year. Like, you have to go. There's so much room for you. Like, you could take up space. You need to come. And I'm like, okay, that sounds amazing. But okay. Like, I kind of just left it at that. Well, the following year, it was the first or second week of June. And she's like, oh my goodness, like the BET Awards are coming up. You need to come out here. And I'm like, well, when is it? And she's like, next week. And I'm young, right? So I'm like, next week, who has money to go to LA? And she's like, no, I'm telling you, I've been praying about it. I just feel like God really wants you to be out here. Like, he has something for you here. I just feel it. And so I'm like, okay, all right. Like, now I'm getting pumped up because I have somebody speaking life into me and putting something in my face. My family always says that exposure creates appetite. So now that I see it, I'm like, okay, now I want to do it,
Right.
But also my bank account said otherwise. So as crazy as it seems, and as much as my family disagreed with me making the decision, I bought a one-way flight to LA because my friend said, as long as you can get here, I got you. So if I eat, you eat. So I bought a one-way flight to LA. And after I took that leap of faith, I hadn't even gone yet. And I got an email from a makeup artist, a celebrity makeup artist that also owns her own brand of cosmetics. And she's like, hey, I've been watching you on social media for a while. I love your work. If you're ever in LA, I would love to have you as an assistant. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be there Thursday. She's like, well, great. I want you to assist me because her cosmetic company was a sponsor for the BET Awards that year. And so I'm thinking like, oh, the stars are aligning. Like my parents are going to flip out because I felt like they were hating on me at first, but things are lining up. So crazy. Again, I scrambled and grabbed the last of my money to buy this flight. It was cheaper for me to fly from Dallas instead of Houston. And so I took a mega bus to Dallas. And what are the odds that she was coming from New York City, had a layover, and we ended up being on the same flight, sitting next to each other. Wow. So I'm like, oh, you can't make this up. Like God is setting this thing up, you know? And so I take a selfie and I send it to my parents. Like,
what were they saying?
They just were like, wow, that's amazing. And I feel like they started to like believe with me that something great was going to happen.